I'm here to talk about everything that I read in March. So, only 3 books again, but I'll go through my little rundown as usual. So, the first thing that I read this month was Explosion in a Cathedral by Alejo Carpentier. And I definitely really like this one. I highly recommend this one. I've only read before by him The Kingdom of This World, and I would also recommend that one. If you do get that one, try to get this edition because there are some like various translations out there, and I know this is definitely one of the better ones. Yeah, but this one is called The Kingdom of This World. And I think he actually wrote this one a lot earlier. This one, I think if, the quick Google search I did, if I'm remembering it correctly, this one is like 20 years later. But basically, what is it that I like about these books? What is it about him that I love so much? Well, he has his own like sort of philosophy that is so fascinating. It's called the Marvelous Real. It's like Marvelous Real, but I think that's how he would pronounce it. If you are going to read any of his books, first I would definitely recommend reading his essay, The Baroque and the Marvelous Real. Just because if you do so, you'll have a better sense of, what he's getting at. I mean, it's pretty obvious in the page, but basically, I'm talking about them in tandem, even though I read this one, but it seems pretty consistent in his work that he's always critiquing the Enlightenment and idealism, and instead presenting his own vision of the world, which is more based in materialism and the natural world, which is really oversimplifying it, but basically he is sort of like a dissident of the surrealist movement. He has moved back and forth between Cuba and Europe. He was born in Switzerland, but identified, as a Cuban national. And his whole sort of body of work is him trying to create, very distinct Latin American art. And when he was in France, he was good friends with George Bataille. So if you are a fan of Bataille, I would strongly recommend Alejo Carpentier's work. He's not like copying him. He definitely has his own philosophy, but they live in like similar worlds, more or less, and they're really interested with the sacred and profane, turning things upside down, excess. To really go through his ideas, I'll just point to some things in this book, Explosion in a Cathedral. This book is basically about the impact of the French Revolution on the French colonies and the other colonies in Latin America, in South America, and the sort of, ideological hypocrisies that were in place. In France, they were preaching the rights of man, the idea that we are all equal, but in the colonies where slavery was still, allowed, slavery was a practice, it was very obvious that there was no such thing as the sort of equality that they spoke of, or this equality was limited to very select few people. So this book really plays with that idea, and you'll see often, references to great works of literature or Enlightenment literature referenced offhandedly, and these sorts of ideas overrun by the sort of explosive freedom that is just present in the land in Latin America, which is really what his idea, the Marvelous Real, is about, is just that, the world itself is sacred, and within, this sort of always evolving, always consuming, birthing and destroying like world of nature, that is where you'll see some sort of marvelous or sacred experience. It's not something that you need to like construct ideologically through surrealism. It's something that we already all have access to, or at least especially, if you are somewhere that has a sort of natural landscape. It's like basically, I would say the Kingdom of This World is a sort of tighter version of this text, because Kingdom of This World is about the Haitian Revolution, so it really looks in detail about a more compressed time span of revolution, while this is more like the lasting after effects, of a revolutionary explosion of new ideas and how it spreads out across the world. So one of the things he often has as a theme is just the violence of any revolution. There's violence in both books, but I feel like this one is definitely way more violent. So if you're into that or against that, I'd say keep that in mind depending on which one you choose to read. Yeah, and the book sort of explores like how easily revolutionary figures can also become like oppressors or the next set of despotic leaders. And you can see I really like, I feel like I marked this one up a pretty good bit. Maybe it's not showing up well, but I definitely I'm like looking for quotes now and I don't even know like which one to read out because there's so much that I really liked in here. Yeah, so he's always sort of like deconstructing dualisms. He's saying in this one page that no symbol better expressed the idea of the sea than the amphibious females of ancient myths, whose softest flesh offered itself to men's hands in the pink hollows of the conches, the sound of which had echoed for centuries when the oarsmen of the archipelago pressed their lips to the shell to tear from it the coarse sonority of the sea storm, the roar of the Neptunian bull, the solar beast blowing over the immensity of the sun's vast domains. And I'm skipping a bit, and then he says, Esteban marveled at how language on these islands had resorted to agglutination, verbal amalgam, metaphor to translate the formal ambiguity of matter that partook of several essences. There were trees called acacia bracelets, pineapple cowries, wood ribs, 10 brooms, clover cousins, pine nut jugs, filter clouds, and iguana sticks. And so it's like the ideas and language itself has to adapt to this sort of landscape because it is so overpowering. And of course, again, there is that sort of Bataille touch with this like solar presence, this sort of destructive sun. And yeah, there's just so many passages in this book that are just like these amazing descriptions of the landscape. So I feel like this one, it did take me a while to read because it's so dense. Like the prose feels very dense or, you know, rich in a very good way. Yeah, and it's just so fascinating as well. And it's like these ideas that they're discussing of revolution, of seeing the world differently. It's, you know, the ideas don't just exist in the idea. Like it will eventually branch out into the world and cause real change, even if it is just within the person considering these things themselves. It will. He's talking about in one part that, you know, there the title of this book is a reference to a painting. And there's one line where the character is looking at it and thinking that, you know, the cathedral is the representation of his own being. You know, an explosion has occurred within it, however deferred and gradual, shattering altars, symbols, and objects of veneration. Even these sort of lofty ideas are able to create an explosion or sense of destruction within oneself, in like one sense of self. So yeah, it's just so fascinating, this book, how he makes, I guess, just, yeah, these ideas, plays with them, toys with the hypocrisies present in them, and shows how they, you know, actually go out into the world and how the world conquers them in turn in this sort of cyclic way. He's very interested in things mixing, in cultures mixing, ideas mixing. So, you know, there's also all sorts of like factions and groups. You know, I'll just add on like my video from last month. This is another book that has Freemasons in it. So if you like that sort of thing, again, this is a good one to read. I just really kind of vibe with his idea of the world. I will say for like criticisms that I've seen some scholarship and other people as well will say that, you know, maybe his representations, you know, of the slaves, of the indigenous people, and of women as well could fall like pretty flat. He has like a sort of fetishistic. I saw in one paper is described as like fetishistic primitivism, which is also what Bataille is guilty of, just simplifying them in his representations, or, you know, acting like people are so inherently revolutionary just for existing, in kind of a weird way. It's a little hard to describe, but I'm sure you'll notice obviously if you read it. But despite that, I still think what he tries to comment on in his work is admirable, and I mean, he definitely like really explores these ideas thoroughly. So I would just recommend it for sure. Now, the other two books that I read this month, I don't have a physical copy of, but I read Paradise Logic by Sophie Kemp, and I don't really know how I feel about this one. I feel like I just have a very different view of the world from her, but I get what she's saying. Basically, this book, I mean, is really funny. I think if you have a taste for some of the stuff she's talking about, if you know, it's sort of like a bleak, hetero, pessimistic world where this girl is trying to go on a quest to become the ultimate girlfriend. So there is a sense of whimsy. Um, I don't know. I feel like I'm limiting myself with what I say because every review I read of this book is kind of like, oh, but that's not what she is trying to say. Or I feel like she would hate anything I say about her book. Like she would just feel like I've even seen like people getting like catching strays in their YouTube comments on this book that, oh, like don't call her quirky, but the book is quirky. Like I don't know what you are supposed to think. Um, but anyways, it's sort of like leaning into this whole like girl aesthetic that is popular now in pop culture and, you know, fashion and the like. You know, it's like if you kind of girl mathed your way through a book, like of course it's like it is probably taking inspiration from things like this. It's seen as a sort of like post-internet novel. Yeah, it did make me think of like a video game, like in a good way. That was one of the things I liked about it. I kind of just wish it was even more so like that. I kind of wish she upped the whimsy. You know, there's like a social satire. It's basically just about like very unsatisfying heterosexual relationships or loving someone that doesn't really care about you at all, doing all sorts of things with them to try to get them to like you, if you know what I'm saying, but not getting that reciprocated ever. So I guess that kind of does seem to be like a common tale these days. So, you know, I can definitely see how the book would be like relatable and enjoyable for a lot of people. But yeah, like I kind of like parts where she starts talking about going to like taken to like the blacked out like girlfriend CIA camp where they like shave her head, or she's doing like cartwheels in the mall to try to impress this guy. I like when she really leans into that sort of stuff, but it feels like I don't want to say the joke is played out, but there's some of the parts where I think the comedic timing is off. And I'd say like, yeah, I get maybe the book is not 100% trying to be a comedy, but basically like I think it just kind of drags a bit. I don't think it's a very long book, but it just felt like it was dragging at parts. But I don't regret reading it. I've definitely read way worse stuff. It was like kind of fun. I wanted to read this one because of the cover. I'll put the cover up because it has this like anime girl on it, and it kind of has this like online ceramic style graphic design with the ironic Comic Sans. So I was like, okay, like, you know, I was actually seeing other people mention it, and I was like, okay, I feel like I have to read it just because it has anime on the cover. So I did, and yeah, it was alright. Again, I feel like the author herself would like get mad at me for saying this or grouping her book with these other books, but it kind of makes me tempted to read like every single like New York City dime square e-girl post-internet Adderall prose novel. Um, and do like a ranking or something. I might do that. I just think that's a really funny idea. Um, so you might see more books like that in the future on my channel. I might go more in depth. Yeah, so to give you an actual plot summary though, the book is about a girl who is trying to become the ultimate girlfriend because obviously once you're a girl, that's every girl's dream and that's all we can achieve. So it's sort of playing on that idea. Um, and she finds a guy that is like a loser grad student. I mean, those sorts of parts are really funny. Like, I did kind of relate to the parts where they're like, oh, yeah, you know, that's what the grad students do. There's like this pack of boys called the Joycean boys who read Joyce. And, you know, if you're a girl, you're just supposed to, there's like a line like, you're just supposed to wear your saddle shoes and listen to the boys talk about Marx. So, you know, there's bits like that. It's like a pretty funny satire. So I think if you were looking for like a like more fun read, even though it is kind of also like disheartening, like the state of gender relations in 2026, I still think it could be worth reading. I feel like it could definitely be some people's cup of tea. And then the final thing I read this month was actually Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. I kind of just picked one because this is one that I had heard the name of a lot, and I believe this is the one where he actually kind of gained his fame with. So I was watching this like Japanese radio interview with this like musician that I really like, and they kind of introduced him as a professor or like sensei of subculture, underground like Japanese culture or alternative to mainstream culture. There is a specific term that is used in Japan often of like subculture. Um, so which might have like different connotations than how we use it, you know, in America or in English, but he was giving examples of things that are subcultural, and he did say Haruki Murakami. And you know, that is kind of funny because here in America, the reason I started reading him is because he is like the most popular Japanese author. If I tell someone, oh, I'm interested in Japanese literature, they just want to start talking to me about their favorite Haruki Murakami novel, and then I feel like a fraud because I hadn't read any. I mean, now I've read Hard Boiled Wonderland and The End of the World, and now I've read Norwegian Wood. So you know, it's something I'm working on so that I can have a solid opinion when he comes up in conversation. Yeah, but I actually did like this one. So what that musician was saying, the reason Murakami is subcultural is that that was sort of the he had that a different sort of reputation before Norwegian Wood, or maybe there's yeah. So if I like patched the timeline together in my head that I glanced on, you know, Wikipedia together, then it seems like Norwegian Wood was kind of his like breakout success novel though. So, but he did have more of like a subcultural sort of bent to him, uh, you know, and then blew up. But actually, he is more seen more as more literary outside of Japan than he is within Japan. I was actually reading an article about this that, you know, in Japan, critics like Koji Karatani think that Murakami is like he's like too subcultural, too silly, like not highbrow enough. And then there's some other critics that say doesn't lean into this sort of like light novelish, like uh, you know, pop cultural aspect enough, and he's too highbrow that is alienating somewhere, doesn't really fit it. So he kind of does have his feet in both worlds. I guess he is just a very postmodern writer in that way, that he's kind of high and low. So yeah, it's just interesting to think about. I think he probably does have a very different um, reception or reputation, you know, inside versus outside of Japan, even though he's like probably definitely popular in both places. But yeah, so I just thought that was pretty fascinating to read about. And the reason they characterize his work in this subcultural way is, well, the guy on the radio show that I was mentioning said that you know, Norwegian Wood, he said it basically really captures seishu no kodoku, or the pain, the loneliness, the solitude of youth. And I repeat that now, not just to be like, this is an untranslatable term. I'm not trying to say anything like that. But I think that actually is like a really good description of Norwegian Wood. That is really the experience I felt. I think it is a pretty interesting novel. Like because it takes a perspective of an older man looking back at the relationships he had, like, you know, when he first went to college, and how those impacted him, the things he wished he had done. And it kind of feels like, you know, I think it does capture this sort of emotional world so well, because it really is true that, you know, when you're living through something, or especially when you're young, maybe you don't even have the experience to know how to categorize things or how to interpret things in your life. So through his memory, he's able to kind of look back and reflect on his emotions in a more intelligible way, that it seems like, you know, based on the actions of the character, he really did not understand at the time. So he really was just kind of like a, I guess you could say, a foolish young man. That's really just like the what the book takes on, the sort of actions that he is taking, and the sort of mistakes he makes with dating and how he treats women, stuff like that. So, you know, I thought it was kind of funny to read this and also read Paradise Logic, because maybe it's kind of like two sides of the same experience. But I don't think the boyfriend in Paradise Logic had any level of depth compared to a Murakami character. So I had to give Murakami a win there. I think it did capture, it's kind of just, you know, maybe this is a typical thing or cliche theme, but, you know, like love and loss. But he does it well. I think he does it well. And it does really just feel like reflecting on things, you know, like honestly, the book, I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of like what my friends do. Like, he'll just go see a movie, go wander around, go to the izakaya at 3 a.m., have a couple beers, wander around till the sun comes up, read a novel. Just like, there's a lot of references to, you know, uh, music, pieces of music and literature and things like that the character is going through. And it's not to be pretentious. It feels like it's just cultural touch points, especially because I believe he would have been like coming of age in like the late 60s to 70s. So, it's not like he's trying to be pretentious. He's just naming the songs of his day, the music of his time that, anyone that age would be listening to. So it has a sort of like generational aspect to it. But yeah, I think it does kind of capture like the mindset of youth well. So that is probably why I would recommend it. And that is also, again, what some of those critics were saying, the sense in that his work is subcultural is that, like, he is such a popular writer, and there, because he makes all these references, I've seen that read through the lens of this sort of like otaku database culture, which I'll make a video on that in the future. There's like these like fan made like collection books that try to organize and list and name and catalog every single offhanded cultural reference that he makes. It's like there's like a sort of fandom surrounding his books, or not just in fans of the book, but like a literal fandom. Like you might have like a fandom for like comic books or something. So yeah, that is a pretty interesting way to perceive his work, because when I was reading it, I did think like, oh, this kind of feels like a light novel as well. The book Norwegian Wood, or Hardboiled Wonderland is like sci-fi. It did kind of make me think of like Kino no Tabi or something, and I wasn't just trying to assume that just because it is like a Japanese book, but that's just like actually how it is. That's how it is perceived as being, like, even within Japan. So I think you can call me like a Murakami fan. I know he is like a slightly controversial, is like a certain type of guy, but I like that he captures that. I like that he actually is able to do that, because honestly, Norwegian Wood kind of is about like a performative male. Like if you're thinking of like a hip young guy drinking matcha, walking around with his tote bag, buying vinyl, that is just the protagonist of Norwegian Wood. But I think that the book is able to capture that with a lot of depth in a way that is really engaging. And even the characters, like when they are just saying something that is more stupid or flat or offhanded, like I think the one character, Midori, she's like, oh, I want someone to buy me cake just so I can be like, I don't even want this. It's like you could say like, oh, the female characters are so like flippant and one dimensional, but like honestly, sometimes people are just silly. I think that like he captures that well, and sometimes I could kind of relate to certain characters in certain ways. Like sometimes it is the unimportant things that actually matter the most. So I know that's kind of vague, but that was just kind of the general impression I got from this book. And I've heard that actually this one is like one of his least popular ones. A lot of people don't like it because has less of the sort of like magical realism or surrealism that his other books have. So if you're looking for that, this is not the one to pick up. It's more just like a regular recounting of someone's youth, like life experience sort of thing. So if you want something really out of the box, it probably won't be this one. But if you go in with that in mind, I think it's worth reading. Actually, I really kind of did like this one, I have to admit. Okay, so that's everything I read this month. I have to apologize because in my next video, I got my proposal accepted to write a book chapter, so I have to read a lot of theory. So I don't know if I'll be reviewing any fiction books at the end of April, but I'll definitely have something interesting to say, I hope. So I'll be reading like more theory, philosophical books. Thank you for watching my video, and have a great day or night wherever you are.